It literally felt like I was blindsided, pummeled, hit from behind for 27 years. And then the last 5 years, I just get to think about things on my own and not having to always relive it and fight for each moment.
This is Look Again, and I'm your host, Faydra Aldridge. Hello, and welcome to Look Again, Mental Illness Reexamined, brought to you by the BC Schizophrenia Society, or BCSS, and other BC partner organizations. So happy you're here today. And this episode brings a whole new era to our podcast. If you're following us on Apple or Spotify, thanks for continuing to join us and to follow us. And if you're joining us on YouTube, well, then you obviously know what we're doing. We are bringing you video. This will allow you to get up close and personal with our guests. You're going to be able to see their expressions. You're going to be able to see and hear them. So we're so happy to be embarking on this new journey. And this season, we are going to be hearing about more voices. We're going to be hearing more about what it's like to live with a serious mental illness and what it's like for those who love and care for those individuals. Today, we're looking at what recovery from schizophrenia means, and that goes beyond the medical definition and the idea of there being a cure. Because as we know, at least at the current time, there is no cure for schizophrenia. Recovery might mean stability. It might mean an enhanced feeling of purpose, or simply just being able to live a life that feels like your own once again. Today, you are going to hear from two voices with two very different paths. The first person is Matthew Dixon. Matthew is from Eastern Canada and has spent most of his adult life navigating schizophrenia. His symptoms first emerged while he was a university student in the early 1990s, at a time when mental illness really was not talked about very openly. What followed were years of symptoms, of fear, and great uncertainty. Matthew speaks very openly about how overwhelming and terrifying his experiences were. And for a long time, he had absolutely no idea what was going to happen to him and whether his life was going to feel manageable once again. But Matthew's story doesn't end there. After decades of persistence, of treatment, of medication, of reflection and support, he reached a place that he never thought that he would ever get to. His recovery includes medication and daily intentional self-care. And now, Matthew uses his experiences to help others through his organization called Mind Aid, and even cycling across Canada to raise awareness and hope. Here's Miles Constable with BCSS talking to Matthew.
Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the show. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. You said that when schizophrenia first hit, it hit hard. Can you briefly take us back to that time? What changed in your life, and when did you realize something was seriously wrong? I knew about mental health vaguely. I knew the word psychology, but I didn't know about mental illness as in schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, bipolar, OCD. I was low on energy my very first year of university. My second year, I started to feel blunted emotionally. And my third year, I started to be forgetting some of the things I did the day before, a tiny bit of memory loss. And that same year, my third year, I felt like I was seeing things in 2 dimensions, not 3 dimensions. I felt like I was disconnected from the world in front of me, but I could still interact with people in front of me. And it felt like I had a brain transplant, like I had my brain taken out of my body and someone else's brain put inside. And that brain, that person was making me think and do and say these things. People didn't talk about mental illness at all. I had no idea. So I had another symptom or two creep up, but my last year, I started having some suicidal thoughts. So through university, through those 5 years, I was on the university rowing team. I did a triathlon. I bicycled across Canada after my third year. That was a huge, huge thing for me to do. But I was getting mostly A's in engineering. I never had to get a student loan. I had summer jobs that paid for all my education. I was living on my own, living independently, doing all my finances. But I was having all these symptoms at the same time. Yeah, and that's when it hit hard. They took me to the psych ward in the hospital, and within a matter of weeks, I couldn't do anything. I was on suicide watch. I didn't know if I was going to live or die from one moment to the next. It was terrifying for me. I couldn't, I just terrified to leave the hospital, terrified to do anything. And that was where I had to decide what to do with my life. What does this mean? They diagnosed me with schizophrenia. I didn't know what the future held in store for me. It was a lot of unknowns. That's really interesting because your symptoms weren't the classic hallucinations or delusions that often associate with schizophrenia. So what forms of treatment have you tried and what's helped the most? Back then, I didn't have a lot to go on. And they tried me on about 6 or 7 of the older 1960s antipsychotics. And they tried me on each one for a week or two. None of them changed anything for me after a week or two. And then they said, well, we'll try you on this new one that's just come out. It's risperidol is what they tried me on. It's what I'm still on. And after a week, I noticed a small improvement in my mental health. It was a feeling of just clearer thoughts and slightly less negative emotions. And I continued to have that improvement for every week. It was a lessening of pain, of emotional pain, less negative thoughts, and slightly clearer thinking. And they just kept building on each other. They told me when I was in the hospital, when I was first diagnosed, to not ruminate. Matthew, you've got to keep active. So that's what I tried to do. But I really had a desire to just sit there and think. I found this book, What Doesn't Kill Us, by Stephen Joseph, and it talks about post-traumatic growth. And the way they said to get post-traumatic growth is from reflective rumination. There's a downward spiral kind of rumination that's negative, where you say, my life is awful, I can't get through this. But there's another kind of rumination that's positive, constructive, like trying to solve a puzzle. Like, let's figure this out. Like, what happened? How can we improve on this? And that's what I was doing. I would be able to push myself to feel certain emotions or to have clarity of thought, put the whole event behind you and learn from it and become stronger and move on. I've been using this reflective rumination for a long time. And one day in 2021, my symptoms stopped. I woke up in the morning and they were gone. The only analogy I have is it's like whatever pathways kept forming week by week by week over 27 years in my brain. Finally, one day, it's like someone hacking through the jungle with machete, trying to make a path. And, finally one day you come out the other side into the light and you've carved this path through the jungle slowly. It literally felt like I was blindsided, pummeled, hit from behind for 27 years. And then the last 5 years, I just get to think about things on my own and not having to always relive it and fight for each moment, fight for the next few minutes, keep pushing myself to keep going and keep going and keep going. I get to sit here and just relax and sort of watch life go by in front of me instead of always trying to fight to keep going. That's my life up until now. But I have not been able to say that's my life up until now since I was a teenager when this disease hit. It's something that I'm really looking forward to saying, oh, okay, that's what I went through. But it's still a little scary to look behind me in the rearview mirror. Just the whole experience of schizophrenia. It still scares me a little bit and I can't really look it straight in the eyes, but I'm getting very close to that. It's an amazing journey that you've been on. I've heard you say before that you now feel like your teenage self again. What does recovering mean to you personally, and how's that different from being cured? So I take my medication. I still take it. You're going to have a hard time getting me off my medication. Maybe someday they will find a cure. It was hard to think about things super positively. And I just bicycled across Canada at the age of 20. I got this disease at 22, and it was a real high to a real low. And with negative thinking and depression at the time, I was really disheartened by the fact that I had to be on a medication. I'm like, what? I have to take this pill? It was such a ball and chain to me. But at the same time, I knew it was one of the few things that I could do to really to improve me. And so as much as I didn't want to be ball and chain to this drug, I was like, get that drug into me. I wanted it. It was another step towards being pain-free. So now taking a pill is nothing to me. I try to live a healthy lifestyle, which everyone should anyway. So
I'm conscious of watching my stress levels. So I keep trying to push myself to take on new things, to see what I'm capable of. But I know if I start to get stressed, which hasn't happened in years and years, I've done a fairly good job of only taking on what I think I can handle.
Yeah, you mentioned that you haven't had symptoms for many years now. So why not go off the drug?
Oh, no. Some people might, but no, for me, it terrifies me to think of, I've just spent the last 3 decades of my life trying to get out of this. And if I just stop doing this very simple thing to do, that could increase my chances of going back into what I just went through. For me, that's just not what I'm going to do. I've never felt good enough to go off my meds ever. And now that I am feeling good, even still, like it's going to be over my dead body to go off my meds.
For people who feel like they're clinging to a thread, what do you wish more people understood about the fact that you can recover without being cured?
I encourage people who are clinging to just keep hanging in there. You may not know what's going to happen in the next few minutes, next hour, next day. I understand the scary, the fear, the terror. I've been through terror.
So is there anything you wish you knew earlier?
I wish I knew that the pain could come down to more manageable levels. When the disease first hit, it was very painful, and it was hard to imagine any other pain than what I was feeling at that moment. And if I knew, which is what happened to me, that it would come down to more manageable levels, but it was at a more manageable level where I could keep going and doing these things. And I know some people with schizophrenia, they do still have symptoms, but they get a lot out of life anyway. You can find purpose. And maybe you're in a place where that you don't get a lot of pleasure out of doing these things, but I encourage you to do them anyway. I love traveling. I traveled across Canada a number of times throughout my recovery. And yes, I wasn't in the best of health when I was out. All these things are things that you could be thankful that you did later on if you can't feel the pleasure from doing them right away. Like some people help other people or do something kind, and you might get enjoyment from it right away. For me, I was sort of more blunted emotionally a lot through my recoveries, so I couldn't really get tons of pleasure from doing these things, but I did them anyway. I'm very thankful I did, because it's just something you can say about yourself. It's your story. You still get to write your story. We still get to do things. It's not, there's still things we can do despite all these things. You can say to yourself, yeah, like my life was bad. My life was bad. I had struggles, but I did all these things anyway, even though it wasn't this party the whole time. I did them anyway.
Speaking of helping people, I know you have an organization called Mind Aid. And what are some things that have you inspired, and how are you using your organization to help people?
Yeah, so I don't know why I never went looking for online information on mental health in developing countries. My heart went out to people with mental illness in war-torn countries, extreme poverty. So I started looking at the cause, and I realized that there are groups helping using these models of basic mental health care in developing countries. But the groups, it's a vastly under-resourced cause, and there are groups helping, but they're relatively small, and the groups are scattered across the web. I thought, what if I put them all on one site so it could be more of a hub for people to find these groups in the first place and pick and choose to see which ones they'd want to donate to. So that's what I did. And that was 2018, and I keep finding more as time goes on.
Yeah, well, we're really glad that you reached out to us and that you've connected with BCSS. You're a great champion for the cause and, success story. So I've just got one more quick question for you, and that is, what can we do to take a stand against stigma?
Oh boy, I think about this. It's, in the 90s and 2000s, I was told not to talk about mental illness, not to talk about schizophrenia. Don't talk about it. And I was confused at the time. And I'm like, why? Like, do people think I'm a serial killer? Do people think I'm going to hurt them? If someone finds out I have this disease, will they phone the police? Will they lock me up? So years went on. The Bell Let's Talk campaign came out in Canada, and that's when we started to, oh my gosh, someone talking about mental health in public. And then with the pandemic, we were talking about mental health all the time. I just encourage people to talk about it. I was terrified to say the word schizophrenia in public, and I never did until just a few months before I was going to bike across Canada again in 2023. I said, Matthew, if you're going to start this as a fundraiser and tell people about schizophrenia, you've got to start talking about it in public.
Right.
So I did. Just have conversations about it. It's we're humans. We have dreams, goals, different personalities.
Yeah. Well, it's great to know that stigma hasn't held you back, and you've been able to enjoy all the success since then. Matthew, it's been amazing chatting with you today, and I'm so glad we had you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
Now, there's a lot to absorb with Matthew's story. For Matthew, recovery isn't about finding a cure. It's about being able to live again inside his own mind. Medication is an act of self-care. Recovery did not erase his past. It just simply reshaped it. Matthew's story is just one version of recovery. We know there's multiple stories, and we know that recovery can look like different things to different people and at different points in their lives. Our next voice is Abigail. Abigail lives with schizophrenia and has navigated the challenges of substance use. She talks about sobriety, medication, and daily self-care. Now let's meet Abigail.
My name's Abigail. I'm recovered from mental health disorder, substance use disorder. I'm someone who loves life on my good days and struggles with the hard days, but I'm able to make it through. And I just take one day at a time. That's the best I can do. So that's all I ask of myself, right? So yeah, I'm now 27 and a half months sober. So that's a big thing. I'm also 27 and a half months sober from mental health, being in a psych ward or having a psychotic break. The beautiful thing about being in recovery of mental health and substance use is that doing the work has paid off. I am now working full-time in a capacity of administration and some social work, which I've been educated in both. And I also have been able to secure my N license, and I bought a car, financed a car, but it's still mine, right? So, but I have to be diligent about self-care, about what I drink and eat, and who I hang out with, and what I do on a daily basis. And so I've worked hard, and I also do personal work with recovery so that I don't pick up again. When I was 24, I had a breakdown when I was traveling in India, and I ended up in hospital, and the psychiatrist diagnosed me as paranoid schizophrenic. When I came back to North America after that trip, and this was in 1996, and when I got back to Calgary in 97, they diagnosed me as just bipolar. And then years later, through addiction and mental health, I struggled and ended up in an institution in Claresholm. But then I was diagnosed again, re-diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, back to that. And then when I got to Abbotsford, the psychiatrist here diagnosed me as bipolar schizoaffective. Facing the stigma in our society is something that I love that BCS is really upfront about, and really good about sharing that you don't have to be afraid of someone with schizophrenia. I'm just a normal human being that has a disease that needs treatment and needs medication and self-care and support and love, and that don't be afraid of me because I tell you I'm hearing voices. Lots of people, when I say I have auditory hallucinations, have reacted like, I don't know if I can talk to you because you might do something to me. That's not always the case. As if you can stabilize on medication with schizoaffective or schizophrenia, you don't necessarily do the commands that the hallucinations are asking you to do, or you don't necessarily believe in the delusion that you're having at that point. It's not a personality or a person disorder. It is an organic split from reality where you have delusions and hallucinations, and it becomes your paranoia rises, your fear rises, your anxiety rises, your serotonin levels drop, your brain, your neurotransmitters aren't connecting properly, that you're not getting the dopamine's off, that the endorphins are off, the serotonin's off. That's why we take medication, so these things can be leveled out and give us the chance to not be in psychosis and not to be living our delusions as if that was what reality is, right? I still have delusions. I don't live them. I acknowledge them, but I don't let them rule me. I can't, because I know when I wake up after a good night's sleep and taking my meds in the morning and night, that the reality I'm in, I know it's real. In our society, we have to treat the fear that people have with mental health. When I look at my life, I'm stable. I don't have to ever go in psych. I don't ever have to do anything that's hard. I know that schizophrenia sucks sometimes, and being bipolar, schizoaffective sucks, but it's also a gift because it gives me insight to what other people who are struggling have to deal with too. And that's why knowing I'm getting this job, huge. I feel like people can learn compassion, can learn empathy, can learn connection, can learn acceptance, can give grace, can flourish when they're supported and loved and encouraged. So I feel like in community, we could learn how to remember the connection that you have with your family. If you have good relationships, wouldn't you want that for people who are struggling with mental health? I would hope so, you know.
Abigail's story reminds us that recovery is possible, even when challenges continue. Like Matthew, she emphasizes the importance of treatment and medication. She also highlights boundaries, routine, and the importance of community. Schizophrenia is not a moral failing. It's an illness that can respond to treatment, but it requires support and lots of compassion. For everyone affected by serious mental illness, we know it can be challenging, it can be difficult, but there is hope. Recovery is not about being cured. It isn't about never ever struggling again. And it's not about following one single solitary path. It can mean stability, insight, connection, purpose, or maybe just having the tools to get through every single day. With the right treatment and the right support, people can and do build very fulfilling lives. If today's episode resonated with you, and I really do hope it did, if you're looking for information, for resources, or for family support, please visit bcss.org. And remember, together, we can help each other. Together, we can make an impact. And together, we are stronger than stigma. My name is Faydra Aldridge. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for listening. And just remember, you are not alone. We're coming to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of the land now referred to as British Columbia.
Look Again is produced by Paula Baker at Jar Podcast Solutions and executive produced by Faydra Aldridge and Miles Constable for BCSS. It's brought to you by the BC Partners for Mental Health and Substance Use Information, a group of nonprofit organizations providing high-quality mental health resources to help individuals or families maintain or improve their mental well-being. For more information you can trust, please visit heretohelp.bc.ca. This podcast is funded and stewarded by BC Mental Health and Substance Use Services, an agency of the Provincial Health Services Authority.